I know there's some talk of conference schedules being extended out to 9 games from 8, which are very attractive to the TV networks. And there's been some talk of possible changes to conference championship games, converting to possible conference play-in games. As going forward, as you mentioned, there's going to be some guaranteed slots for the conferences. So personally, now that we have a college football playoff system in place, I really don't have a whole lot of interest in the conference championship games. I prefer to see teams stay away from an injury perspective. Do you think there's still a big interest in conference championship games, or are they possibly going away?
The TV networks definitely want them to remain. It is a huge ratings draw, but it's again, there's a lot of flaws in college football. I think the way that we've set up the the whole playoff system, I think this is one of the flaws because once the postseason starts in any sport, like where can you lose and still advance? Like there's supposed to be stakes that are on the line. So like when you have your wild card weekend, it doesn't matter like if you're the higher seeded team. If you lose, you're done. You're going home. But we've had this wacky system where you've had teams lose in their conference championship game and still advance, even in the 14 playoff. You've had teams that don't even make their the conference championship still advance. That happened to Alabama and Ohio State. Didn't even make it to the Big Ten championship, still advanced. And yet the team that's playing in the conference championship game loses and they're sent home. Like, wait a second, they played for the conference championship and they like that doesn't make any sense. So I've always wondered what the fix could be. And with expansion, I do think one of them, now this will be weird, is you have your regular season champ or top two teams, if you're the Big Ten or SEC, because you're getting 4 teams in. You say, you know what? Let's protect them. Let's essentially give them a bye, and let's put our best teams forward. And you would think your best teams forward are the teams that won the regular season. So, and the ACC is a good example because Rhett Lashlee last year was the head coach at SMU, and SMU was the best team in the regular season. And they had to play Clemson in the ACC title game. And they lose the game. There was a very real possibility that if they lost that game, they were going to be left out of the 12-team field. That was a very real debate that was happening going into the game. And even early in the first half, they're getting beat by 3 touchdowns. People are like, they're done. If they lose, they're done. Thankfully for SMU, they were able to come back. They lost on the last-second field goal. The game was close, so they looked on par with Clemson, so they both advanced. But Rhett Lashlee had mentioned at times during the week, he's like, if we don't get in, even if we lose, why should we play? Like, why show up? And it was a very compelling case, and he's right, because there were other teams, Indiana, Tennessee, that weren't going through another game, that weren't as good in the regular season, and they were going to get a pass to the playoffs, and SMU subjecting themselves to another game that if they lose, they're going to get sent home. It just didn't make any sense. So the ACC has thought about this, and I do think it's a pretty good idea because you want your best teams to move forward. You don't want to have an SMU left out just because they lose a conference championship game. So you would have your regular season champ. All right, that's one of our teams. And then for the next team, we would have maybe the 2 and 3 seeds play against each other in a conference champion play into the playoffs games. There have been other times where they've said, let's have 2 games and it's your next 4 teams play. So you kind of have this process where you get your best teams forward, which I like because I think that'll eliminate the team that loses and it'll give the chance that the team that win the best chance to move forward. Because I do think once you start the postseason, it should be win or go home. I mean, that's what people love about the postseason.
Right, right. I mean, it sounds like there's a decent chance though they'll go to 9 conference games, and now you start getting into playoffs. I mean, you're all of a sudden you're playing a lot of games, right? I mean, and how much is injury going to come into all this? I mean, it's not basketball, it's football. Injuries are always going to be such a big piece of this, but that's from my perspective. I'm almost like I don't need conference championships. I love the playoff. Let's get the best teams in there. They're ready to go. And the more you spread this out, I mean, your best teams now, if this is getting spread out a little bit over conference championships, and then you get a bye, I mean, now it's a long time between games for some of these teams, right? I mean, you're happy that you're healthy, but you're definitely kind of getting out of your rhythm. You're getting a little bit of stale. I mean, at some point you might say, hey, I don't know if I want to buy. I want to get
Right.
my team back out on the field. So I get it. Really, really complicated. Ton of money at stake, but not easy.
No. And it's so unique because all conferences are not created equal. So the SEC and Big Ten feel like they deserve more teams in. Because I do think what you are spot on. I think the best way to do it would be to eliminate conference championship weekend game. You could start the playoffs then, and then just seed the teams, put them in a bracket, and go. But the conference championship weekend is too much of a moneymaker for the TV networks. It's just too popular, and it does draw it out. And we're getting championship game played January 21st. I mean, what happened to New Year's Day used to be college football heaven. Like, it was the pinnacle of the season, and it was the end of the season, and you had the Rose Bowl parade, and you had every celebration that goes into it. And now we're 3 weeks past that. It is pretty wild. One of the collateral damage pieces from playing 16 games is the spring football games, which were another part of college football. Just the schedule was you were going to have a spring football game. A lot of programs are canceling them, and I don't blame them. Steve Sarkisian, the head coach of Texas, he's like, I don't want my players. It's another game. They play enough games. So those are falling by the wayside too. Just one of many changes that we've seen.
Yeah, I get you. Danny, let me take you a little bit back. We touched on a couple of things with your career. I know you were always a little disappointed with how things played out in your NFL career. Obviously, you were a very good baseball player. You were drafted your senior year of high school by the Brewers, and again at the end of your college career by the Yankees, despite not even playing any baseball your final 2 years at Florida State. Can you talk a little bit about your NFL career and any regrets you may have that you did not wind up pursuing Major League Baseball?
Yeah, baseball was always my first love. And I think I was a better baseball player than I was a football player. I firmly believe that. And it was more suited to my personality, which I think I probably should have leaned into. Now things worked out incredibly well for the NFL, right? I was lucky enough to be a starter for a couple years. Was able to play 7 years. Financially it was great, but the reason I don't think I was great in the NFL because I was average. I started for a couple years, was okay. We made the playoffs. It was an incredible run. Loved playing for the Giants. That organization was phenomenal. Got to experience some success, but there wasn't that much difference between my skill set and Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees. Like, I was physically gifted pretty much the same way they were. Like, my arm was about the same. But I do think the difference was that was their first love. They had a passion for football. And my passion didn't really reside in football. I had to more force myself to like it, to work hard, to be obsessed with it. And with baseball, it just came more naturally. I loved going to baseball practice. I would show up to football and think, man, here we go. Got to punch in again. It felt more like a job. And I never felt at any point when I stepped on a football field that I was even in the top half of most athletic players. I was always like, holy cow, I got to go against these guys. And when I was on the baseball field, I stepped on there. I was like, I'm the best guy out here. Pitching, hitting, whatever it is, I can dominate. And I do think that was just something that skill set, personality wise, I think baseball could have been, something that I could have pursued. But it might be the hardest sport to prove yourself and go from drafted and going to single A ball or rookie ball, having to prove yourself at each level, single A, double A, triple A, and then finally getting to the bigs and having to stay there where who knows? I might, because everybody's good. And I don't know if I would have been good enough to make it all the way up. And not only are you competing against, in football, you're competing against other college athletes. So you get drafted, there's only 7 rounds. You're probably going to make a roster. There were 50, 60 rounds of Major League Baseball draft, and you're not only competing against other college players, you're competing against high school players, you're competing against international players from all over the world that are the best at what they do, that are all hungry. It is probably one of the hardest sports to make it to the big time in baseball. So who knows if it would have worked out or not. It's not a regret. It's just always kind of, man, I wonder what would have happened.
Yeah, no, I get you. I get it. Yeah, I mean, listen, you gotta if you had that much love and passion, for baseball over football, but you had a really good career. You had a tremendous career at Florida State, right? You backed up Charlie Ward. You went in there the next 2 years. I think your senior year, you and I have discussed it. I mean, I think earlier in the year, in the first half of the year, I mean, you were one of the finalists for a Heisman, right? And I think maybe you had one game where you threw 2 or 3 interceptions. You kind of fell out of that, but I mean, you played at a very high level in college and for Florida State, which was just a tremendous program at the time.
Yeah, it was. We were perennially either ranked preseason 1, 2, or 3. I mean, I think that was the lowest. We never finished outside of the top 5 in my 4 years there. It was part of the stretch of the 14-year run, that Coach Bowden had, where we never were outside of the top 5. I
Right.
still think I don't think Coach Bowden gets enough credit. Nick Saban is kind of the default greatest coach in college football because he's had an incredible run, 7 national championships, been unbelievable. But I do think if Coach Bowden had played in an era where you got 4 teams in, I think he would have been able to challenge those national championships just by getting another opportunity to compete for one.
Yeah, yeah. He just obviously he was a great recruiter, tremendous motivator. Was he a real good, X's and O's type guy? Did he have the full package, or did a lot of that come from his assistants? I mean, it just seemed like a guy that players loved. They wanted to go play for him, an incredible motivator. I mean, was he a real X's and O's guys type as well?
He was, and he was incredibly innovative with trick plays. And, he ran the punt rooski. He was loved calling trick plays. But I think earlier in his career, those things were almost unheard of. And that's where he was cutting edge. But as he grew older, like by the time I got to him, he was much more the CEO role,
Yeah,
where he would get on the headset with Mark Richt and he'd say, "Hey, I want to run this maybe 3 or 4 times a game." But he was more of a delegator of his authority.
yeah,
And he would delegate the responsibilities to Mickey Andrews on the defense, to Mark Richt on the offense. And he was much more of a figurehead by the time I got there. But I think deep down, he knew his football stuff, but he also knew his bread and butter was going to be, in order to win, college football is a talent acquisition business. You can be the greatest coach of all time. If you don't have athletes out there, you have no chance. And I think
yeah.
he realized that early on. So he got the best talent, trusted some of the best coaches to teach it and run the systems, and it worked incredibly well.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just what a great career you had there, a great program. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. We've known each other now, for over 20 years very well. I credit to you how modest you are. But I remember as we got to know each other, you're pretty tall, and I found out, you were all county basketball down here as well. And I'm thinking like, well, it was a small school, but I'm also thinking like, this guy's a freak athlete. He probably was a heck of a basketball player. So I remember I asked you, I said, well, were you recruited at all for basketball? And you said, no. You said, most of the schools knew I was absolutely going to play football and I had an interest in baseball. So basketball all stayed away, with the exception of one program that did recruit you for basketball. And do you remember telling me what program that was?
Oh, yeah. It was the Duke Blue Devils. And this is right after. So I grew up hating Duke. I was a Carolina fan. My sister played tennis at Carolina. I went to Carolina basketball school, which was their summer camp, probably 4 or 5 years in a row. But the summer before 8th grade, and again, I had not played football yet. Baseball and basketball were my sports. And basketball is the most fun sport to practice, right? Because it's just, you go out, you play pickup. So I love playing basketball. But the summer before 8th grade, my dad sent me to North Carolina for about 5 weeks. And so I went to Carolina basketball school. I went to Carolina baseball camp. I went to Duke writers camp, like
Whoa.
writing for my dad thought it was going to
Nice.
be helpful for the SAT. 2 weeks of that. And then I capped it off with a week at Duke baseball camp and Duke basketball camp. So I got to experience the best of both worlds. So went to Duke basketball camp, and it was like, I wasn't the MVP of the camp by any means. There were a ton of great players there, but somehow I think I got put on some sort of watch list for Duke. And I
Huh.
have no idea how or why. And I don't know if it was Duke's football coaches said, "Hey, let's just show him some love." But I told you the story about George Perlis wanting to meet with me. I got called out of class my junior year, and they said, there's a coach from Duke that wants to talk to you. And I had to go to the office to take the call. And so I was like, who is it? And they said, Tommy Amaker. And I was like, well, I remember him from Duke basketball camp. Like he's not a football coach. He's a basketball coach. They said, well, that's the name we got. And so I get on the phone. It's Tommy Amaker. He's like, hey, he's like, you're a great student athlete. He's like, we really think you could help our program. We've got you on the radar for Duke basketball. I was kind of selling the program. I was like, all right. And they stunk at football. So I was like, there's no way I'm going there. But I did love basketball. So I thought it was really cool. And so always kind of tucked that away and didn't give it much consideration. And then probably about 3 months go by, and I'm like getting recruited by everybody. It may have been like really close to signing day when it was February. And I got a letter from Duke basketball, and it was on there. And it said, Dear Danny, we've really enjoyed getting to watch you, but we've decided to go in a different direction. So we really, we won't be recruiting you anymore. And I thought it was funny because like somebody probably either said to them, we have the wrong guy, or he's a football player, or whatever it was. But I thought it was very classy for them to say, thanks for your interest, but we're going to move in a different direction.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what. I know you've done some work with Coach K on Sirius. Does Coach K remember
He
remember
does
you from
not. I keep telling him I want to find the letter from Duke and tell him how it lit a fire under me from not getting recruited, from them stopping. Maybe if they had stuck with it, I would have been a Duke Blue Devil.
Well, I'll tell you what, we are running short on time. I'm going to keep going, but I got to give a shout out to Coach O'Toole, our good friend Tim O'Toole, coaching at associate head coach at Pitt right now. Because that time he and I were in New York, and we got to just through luck and chance, we ended up sitting in with Coach K before he dressed his team the night before they're playing Gonzaga in the Garden the next night. I mean, that was one of the true great experiences of my life. I mean, Coach K was in full Coach K mode. I mean, that was really special. The guy, he's just amazing.
He is. That's been from my broadcasting career, and I think I've only done it 3 or 4 times, getting to fill in as a co-host and like sit next to him. And basically I'm just a fly on the wall because with Coach K's Sirius XM show, it's called Basketball and Beyond, and he gets these mega guests. Like I'll sometimes reach out for guests and you get, just ghosted. Like they don't really like whatever. Like you just don't hear back from them. Pretty much every guest Coach K wants, they're like willing to come on. Not only are they willing to come on, they're kind of excited to talk to him. So that's really cool to see. But from that meeting, I hate again. I hated Duke. I did not like Coach K. I was like, I would never want to play for this guy. From that one meeting that we sat in, just a little pregame meeting, I was like, oh, it all makes sense. Like you see a master motivator of being able to push the right buttons and get his team ready to play. And you see this focus and this intensity and a preparation, which now I see it from his show. Like he puts in a lot of prep. He takes it very seriously. And he just knows how to command a room. Like he commands a conversation. And even when you're just kind of, talking with him before we go on air and stuff, it's been really fun just to get to see that side of him. He'll start ripping on me. I did a video for when Florida State got left out of the playoff 2 years ago when they ran the table and got left out because their quarterback got hurt. I put out a video on X, and it was raining in New York City, and I had an umbrella, and I was like, I was going off.
Yeah.
So as soon as I hosted a show with Coach K, like maybe a month after that, and he goes, now, why were you roaming around the streets looking like a homeless person? Like, that was the first thing he said to me because he saw the video and he was giving me a hard time about it. He's like, can you at least clean up a little bit before you get on camera?
You look so, but you were so bummed out, Matt, man. I was like, man, poor Danny. He's having a tough time up there in New York.
I was, but it's pretty cool to see him and to get to work alongside him has been pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, that is so cool. So that's a good lead in. So pretty cool speculation that I like a lot, that the Big East and ACC could potentially merge. And from what I understand, one of the early proponents of this was actually Coach K. I'd like to see something innovative. Like I'd like to see the ACC and the Big East talk and form a mega basketball conference. People are talking about a mega football conference eventually. Imagine if we had the Big East. Come on. And the quality of basketball to go along with the tradition of basketball in our conference. So, I mean, that's coming from Coach K. And I'll throw in another quote here from your good friend, Seth Greenberg, who's also a big proponent. I think it's a no brainer. I do think they should come together. I do think that football needs to be separated. Chip Kelly said that a long time ago. I've had conversations with the ACC and said, why wouldn't you investigate this? This is a common sense move. It creates great rivalries, creates events. I mean, college basketball, especially, you've got to create events. It's an absolute home run. So, Danny, I realize that we've got TV contracts currently in place. ACC's got a long-term contract. Is this possible in any way? And at some point, is there a need for us to start having separate football and basketball TV contracts for the power conferences?
So you said, is it possible? And if you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I'd say, I don't know. But after what I've seen in the last 5 years of college athletics, anything is possible, right? I mean, anything is on the table. And I think for the ACC and the Big East, they're watching unprecedented success from the SEC and Big Ten because it's the money. It's all about the money. It is an arms race for talent and coaches. And the SEC and Big Ten have been able to buy the best players legally, right? This is all above board with NIL. They've been able to buy the best players and the best coaches. And that's why we just saw a record, 14 teams out of 16 from the SEC get into the tournament. That's why we've seen the Big Ten had maybe the best opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. They did a phenomenal job. And then conversely, look at the ACC. They have their worst year, and they've been on a downward decline. They only get 3 teams in Carolina as a first 4, and now they only have 1 left in the Sweet 16, which I think is the worst it's ever been for the ACC. The Big East, yeah, they've had UConn carrying the torch, and they've had a pretty good basketball conference, but realizing the amount of money that's floated from football programs and both that everybody else has to go with, it makes sense from the Big East to say, all right, well, how can we do something since we don't have great football programs? What can we do to sort of make up for some of that gap? I think it makes a ton of sense for both of them because it is about brands and how do you market those brands and create matchups that people want to watch. So if you can get Syracuse, UConn twice a year, sign me up for it.
Absolutely.
There's some great rivalries. Dan Hurley was just asked about this, last week, and he was kind of on board about it. Dan Hurley's he's a unique guy. So he sounded a little bit irritated. He's like, I know everybody says about this. He's like, but yeah, we should look into it, and I do think we eventually get to a place where not only is football and basketball separate, I think the more likely scenario is that football is separate by itself, where they're not sharing anything with anybody. It's just a football, and we might even see a super league where it's 60 teams, maybe it's 48 teams, whatever, 48 programs that is entirely separate because we're already morphing into a minor league NFL. It always has been minor league NFL, but now that we're actually seeing the money that's coming in and how much money's actually out there, it just seems like it's inevitable. Plus the court systems, if you kind of read the tea leaves, they're eventually probably going to have to play it as employees. So how do you protect the amateur status of soccer players, baseball players? It's a very convoluted system that's very hard to keep up with. But I do think the most likely scenario moving down the road is that football is separate with their own TV deals that pay just the football players. And then basketball maybe eventually gets to that. But I do think maybe there would be hope for basketball that they would kind of be a part of the other athletic departments where they're not kind of mini franchises like you could see in football.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's so much going on now that there's some people that think, hey, everything is going the Big East way, right? Because now all these schools with the new revenue sharing, are where they'll be paying out whatever $21 million. People are saying for the Power Four conferences, 75% of that about is going to football. That's not leaving a whole lot for basketball. Is that a big opportunity for the Big East to come up with some money? But no, how much money can the Big East come up with? I don't know if they come up with 20 million, but they can take more of those funds and put it towards their basketball program. So maybe a nice opportunity for them. But we could talk about this stuff all day. Let me get you moving here. I'm going to say really quickly, watching the NCAA tournament, it just really gets back in my mind. Kids today are bigger, faster, stronger. The court's not getting any bigger. 5 fouls really bothers me. The kids are too big. You know, the kid from St. John's, Kadari Richmond, got taken out of that game by foul trouble. Duke did a really nice job with Cooper Flagg the other day. He had 2 fouls, and they kind of snuck him back in there towards the end of the first half. He had a good game. But I just think 5 fouls in college hoops is tough. I say, you know, and I know the Big East experimented with this, and they said, well, it was too rough, and now are we going to the monitor too much? I say, hey, give each team the in-game option to take 2 players and say that those 2 players are going to get a 6th foul, something like that. I mean, that's very specific, but I mean, you just kind of get the feel like 5 fouls in college hoops is just really tough.
Trust me, as somebody who watched my nephew Ben Middlebrooks play at NC State, I was like, yeah, we could use 6 fouls. Let's go to
Yeah.
6 fouls. But not only the fact that it's not enough, the officiating is so bad. Like it is there's a and it's not an easy job, right? It is not an easy job, but there's different conferences ref differently. Some call, you know, with a much tighter whistle, others let them play a little bit. So when you get to the NCAA tournament, it really becomes problematic because you might have been used to playing a certain way. All of a sudden, the refs are officiating an entirely different way, completely throws you off your game. So I would absolutely be in favor of that. You know, the one thing I don't know how you feel about this. I was always okay if the officials didn't get the exact call in the possession if there's a tipped ball. The amount of times in the last 2 minutes of the half, or more importantly, the game, when I get they have to get it right, but that game slows down to a snail's pace when they're trying to look at the possession. Who did it tip? I think you should have some sort of buzzer or maybe even a challenge where you don't have to do it every single time. And I think it would add another element of strategy to it by being able to keep those for when they do matter the most. Maybe it's 2 a game, save them both for the last minute. If it's that important, it's a 1 possession game, you can use those. If not, if you're down 10, you can let it go. The last minute of college basketball is painfully slow to watch.
Yeah, they've got to either go to a challenge system or just say, hey, we're going to go to the monitor. If we can't tell within 30 seconds, we're going with the call that was made on the floor, right? I mean, it's
Please.
just, I get it. It's huge. You want to get the call right, but it's kind of taken away a lot from the game because it's just dragging out, right? I mean, oh, we're back to the monitor. I don't think it's a good thing for the sport. I really don't. Let me ask you quickly. I mean, Ben and his NC State teammates, Ben Middlebrooks is your nephew, had an amazing year-end run last year, winning the ACC tournament and making it all the way to the Final Four after a very mediocre regular season. I remember Ben when he was about 3 years old, meeting with you, and comes from a great family. He's a great kid. That was just an amazing experience. I mean, you've been on a national championship team, but that was just an amazing run they made last year, right?
It was awesome. I had more fun going to those games with my sister and my brother-in-law and some of my nephews and nieces to be able to go watch that. I'm a fan of Florida State and I'm a fan of the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants, but I'm not emotionally invested. You know, like I like them all. If they win, I'm happy, right? Even Florida State, like if they lose, I'm okay. But when you have like blood relative out there, it's a different level, and it's so much fun when they're having success and winning. And what was really cool was like my sister and my brother-in-law Todd and Daryl. They're very, you know, they were connected to the NC State like family because of Ben. But they like not only my sister and my brother-in-law, but like the NC State family kind of adopted me as one of their own fans. And so they're in there high-fiving, like I'm walking through the hotel lobby and they're like, hey, it's Uncle Danny, like here he is, and like just kind of embrace me. And we go on this trip and it was just so much fun to watch and to get to root for them and to get to see them have the success that no one saw coming with that unlikely run to the ACC championship was one probably it was like it was a memory that our family will remember for, you know, the rest of our lives. To be able to have that type of run and then to have Ben be like a key contributor was really cool, and to see him step up in some big situations was just awesome.
Yeah, Ben really played well down the stretch. He had a couple of huge games and just became such a big contributor. And you know, when you're just not expected, like, all right, it's been a great run. There's no way this can continue, and they just kept winning, right? And they wouldn't have made the NCAA tournament, number one, if they don't make it all the way through the ACC tournament. You know, so just to have kept it going, that was so much fun. You and I were together probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. You know, I kind of said, hey, Coach Keats got him to the Final Four, and he had just kind of been previously let go. I thought that was a little tight. I mean, if somebody gets you the Final Four, I would think you got to get at least 2 years out of that. I mean, I know the record before that run wasn't that great. It was a tough down year this year, but I was a little surprised they let him go after just 1 year, to be honest.
I was too. But I am like, I'm more familiar because I cover it every single day with the irrational passion of college sports fans and also college sports boosters and administrations, right? They are irrationally passionate, which is why you have some coaches like a Jimbo Fisher getting $67 million to not coach. That's what Texas A&M paid him.
Crazy.
That was left on his deal. Insane. That does not make any sense whatsoever. So, like, from that perspective, no, of course he shouldn't have been let go. Like, he took him to the Final Four. It was the first time since, what was it, 80? What was the
Probably
run
since
since?
'83, right?
Yeah, it was
When
the
they won the
first time they had
championship.
been to the Final Four since there. But also was well aware that last year, before the tournament, you mentioned they might not get, they weren't very good. If they get a first or second round exit, he's probably fired last year. And so you've got a fan base that maybe says, all right, that was fluky, whatever it was. But I also think you have to consider this, and I think this is important for context, is look who they brought in. Like, maybe they had a plan to bring Will Wade in. Maybe they had been back channeling those conversations, because if you fire Kevin Keats and you go get some no name, coach from a mid major school and like he's had success, I think there's probably a split fan base. But if you bring in Will Wade, who I know he's got a little bit of a controversial past, but that was a different era, who just had this incredible run with McNeese, and he's been, and was a really good football coach, has a brand, maybe that makes it a little bit more explainable. And is it fair to Kevin Keats? No. Like, I like him. Ben liked him. I think his players really liked him, but it is a harsh business that we live in. And it doesn't matter. We've seen coaches win national championships in college football at two different schools. Gene Chizik at Auburn and Ed Ogeron at LSU, fired within 2 years. Like, there's no such thing as a free pass or a golden ticket that buys you a certain amount of time in this landscape. It's just the pressure and the stress and the expectations are irrational.
Let me hit you with one quick one, and I don't know, I don't really understand it. So if this antitrust resolution gets passed, they're basically saying there will be no more pay for play. And I guess if it gets passed, this would supposedly start next year, right? Next fall.
Yeah.
But yet nothing's in place. And we don't know if ultimately it's going to get passed or there's going to be appeals and delays. But so I'm assuming recruiting is going on right now with the typical NIL offers of pay for play, right? So I mean, because we heard rumors that Quinn Ewers was going to get, someone had offered him $6 million to stay, bypass the NFL draft, and go to another school. So I guess, is it your understanding right now that as far as recruiting for next year, the NIL pay for play is still in place?
Yes. And I think even more so, teams are trying to lock in as many deals ahead of the revenue share model that's going to go into place, so they maybe can get better players and pay them a little bit more than they will be able to when this new system is in place. It is, when I got into broadcasting, I did not think I would need a law degree, but it's almost become like, I've done more trying to understand legal rulings, court cases that are taking place, agreements like this one that you're referencing, this antitrust case. But it is so, and I've been confused on this one, because initially, when it was going to be this $20.5 million, cap that they were going to have to, give to the players to share, I was like trying to follow along. Right, is that just for football? And it's not just for football. It's for all your athletic sports, where you have to decide what percentage of that 20.5 do you want to go to football? What type of that? How much of that do you want to go to basketball? How much of that do you want to go to baseball? How much do you want to go to women's soccer, to a women's lacrosse, to all your athletics programs? So can you imagine the conversation where at a couple schools that already got contentious? I don't know if you remember this. Mark Stoops at Kentucky was complaining about John Calipari and sort of the disparity in the booster. Like, this isn't even for players. This is for facilities. Well, now you're talking about players. Can you imagine some of the conversations that are going to happen and the amount of phone calls that athletic directors or general managers or the heads of the 20.5 million that they're going to get from a Bill Belichick at North Carolina? Like, you don't think Hubert Davis is like, wait a second, I know you've got 6 Super Bowl rings, but we're a basketball school and we need to get our basketball program right. Like, it is. So that's like the first thing that I think is going to be really interesting is how do they divvy up the money? And then for the collectives and the way that we've been paying players now, I thought you were going to be able to go above and beyond. Like, you could, if you wanted to pay players more, like, by all means you could. But what I've been told is that they are creating a new role that is sort of going to be the CEO for the Power 4 programs that is going to monitor to make sure that they don't do that, that they're not paying players for play under the table, just for play, that it's going to be the 20.5. And they're going to monitor that, which I think would be great. I would love to see more parity. I'm tired of being, and I think a lot of fans are tired of seeing Ohio State buy their way to a national championship. And they're not the first one that's done it. They're just the latest example. I want to see more parity on the field. And so with this new system, that should, in theory, bring that. But it also solves the problem where if you do have a Arch Manning, who's a great example, like, Arch Manning can make more than the 20.5. Maybe they pay him $1 million to be the quarterback, but he can make $5 million because he's got ads with Red Bull and he's got ads with TurboTax, whatever companies that want to pay him for his name, image, and likeness. It is a true marketing deal, just like you see in the NFL. Like, there's a salary cap, but Patrick Mahomes makes way more money than Daniel Jones, right? Because he's more marketable. He's a bigger star. So they'll still have that. One thing I've learned, though, is, I mean, was it Days of Thunder, the movie where they said, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying? Like, in college football, it is probably the most prevalent. Does that mean we go back to bagmen, or sort of illegal transactions of cash transactions under the table to make sure certain programs get the most money? But I've been told by multiple people they are really going to try to enforce and make sure that NIL deals are true NIL deals. And if they do, I think it could be really a successful scenario. But the other thing, this agreement, Kat, is for 10 years. This 20.5 is supposed to be in play for 10 years. It's not going to stand up in court because there's a 15-year-old player right now who's a future five-star quarterback who's going to come into college and say, I didn't sign up for that limit. Why are you only going to pay me so much? So I think it's going to get challenged by attorneys, and the system that we have without a union, without players bargaining for themselves, that's why I think we're going to get that separation where it becomes more of a minor league NFL, and then they get a bigger percentage of the revenue from the TV contracts.
So if a kid's coming in to play football next year for Alabama, Florida State, whoever, and he signs a deal right now for NIL, that is set in stone? No, if that
It's
new
my
deal.
understanding that would predate the antitrust. Like Bryce Underwood is the number one quarterback that's going to Michigan next year. I think his deal was reported, again, you can't believe a lot of these reports, but it was $12 million was for him. Now that's probably over 3 years, but let's just say it's $4 million a year, or the Carson Beck numbers that are at Miami, which is $4 million a year. Like, if you're under a system where there's a $20.5 million cap and you have to share that with other sports, you can't spend $4 million on your quarterback because it really would shortchange. You can't put anybody around him and support your basketball program and your baseball program. So I think those deals were done in anticipation of, all right, let's get these under contract. Let's try to lock up Bryce Underwood for 3 years. That deal was before the antitrust agreement, so you can't do anything for that. Yeah. Again, it goes back to the young player who's going to come out and say, wait a second, remember Bryce Underwood? He made this much money. Why aren't I getting this? That's where I think there's some real conflicts that are going to unfold where I don't think we make it anywhere near the 10 years that they've agreed to.
Very, very complicated. And I know early on there was a lot of push to say, hey, can we get some congressional protection here? And you don't hear much of that anymore. I don't think there's any hope there. But, that's just the concern is, okay, if this deal finally gets passed through, how are you going to get protection from, the next antitrust or the kids who are coming up who are saying, hey, I didn't agree to this. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. No, actually, at this point, nobody knows what the answers are. But pretty incredible, right? I mean, we basically have a system in place right now. Right now, there is no limit as to what you can play a kid to come play for your program, right? I mean,
Yep.
5 or 6 years ago, we would have said you're out of your mind. That's just crazy. So incredible changes. I'm going to let you go. We could talk about this all day, but Danny, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you joining us here today on Questions for Cancer Research. We definitely got to return because there's a lot of stuff still to be discussed. All the best to you, Court, and the family. Thank you so much, bud.
I want to know if we made a two-parter because Freddie Couples got the two-parter. We might have to come back on to do another two-parter.
Freddie was just amazing. I think he probably would have gone. I was getting a little bit nervous, his back sitting in that chair, but we might have to go the extra expense here and make this a two-parter. But thanks so much, man. I hope it's a great year for you. Greatly appreciate it, Danny.
Appreciate it, Kat. You're the best.
All
Thanks for
right,
having me
bud.
on.